A millionaire's one-night mistake turned into a contract marriage he tried to leave, until she fell ill. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main characters. It started with a sound that could break silence, crystal shattering against marble. At exactly 11:47 p.m., the grand ballroom of the Everline Hotel went from champagne laughter to stunned quiet. And standing in the middle of it all was Ethan Hayes, 33, billionaire founder of Hayes Biotech, the man who could rebuild a failing heart, but not his own. Beside him, a tall brunette in an emerald gown whispered something sharp enough to slice the air. He turned, face pale, eyes cold, and before the guests could blink, he poured his whiskey over a gold award plaque and walked away. No one knew what had happened, but one camera, one single flash from a journalist hiding behind the floral arch, caught the exact second he disappeared through the service corridor. And that is where Lauren Reed came in. She was not supposed to be there. She was supposed to drop off a portfolio for the hospital's medical illustration project and leave. But she took a wrong elevator, walked straight into the chaos, and collided with the man who had just stormed out of his own gala. Whiskey spilled on her sketchbook, a dozen sketches smeared into abstract stains of brown and gold. He stared at her, eyes still heavy with anger, and said flatly, "Watch where you are going." Lauren looked up, startled but unflinching. "Maybe try walking without setting things on fire," she said. It should have ended there, a flash of irritation, two strangers crossing paths in the wrong place. But when lightning struck outside and the power flickered, the emergency alarm locked the elevator doors behind them. They were trapped in the dim service hall, with nothing but silence and the faint echo of rain. Ethan, still in his tuxedo, leaned against the wall. Lauren crouched down, trying to save her wet pages. He watched her quietly. Something about the way her hands moved careful, precise, cut through the storm inside him. "You are not scared," he finally said. "Of the dark?" she asked without looking up. "No, it does not judge people the way light does." For the first time that night, Ethan smiled, a faint, tired curve that looked foreign on his face. Minutes turned into an hour before the technician came. When the doors opened again, the storm had calmed, but something else had started. At dawn, when she left the hotel lobby, he offered her his business card. She shook her head. "Keep your card," she said. "You already ruined my art. Let us not ruin my dignity, too." By 9 a.m., the headlines had already exploded. Hayes Biotech's CEO seen leaving hotel with unknown woman. One photo, one angle, one misunderstanding. No one cared that she was holding a sketchbook, not a clutch. No one cared that she looked terrified, not seductive. The internet had decided she was the mystery girl. And that single mistake, born out of anger and lightning, would tie their names together in ways neither of them imagined. 3 weeks later, when a black car stopped in front of her small Brooklyn apartment and a man in a gray suit handed her a thick envelope, Lauren froze. Inside was a contract embossed with gold. Marriage agreement. Confidential. The voice of the attorney was calm and detached. "Miss Reed, Mr. Hayes requests your signature. It is strictly legal. It will protect both parties from the scandal." She looked up, her heartbeat thundering louder than the rain. "Protect?" she whispered. "Or control?" The lawyer hesitated, then said quietly, "Miss Reed, for what it is worth, he did say this was the only way to save you." And that single line, "to save you," was where the real story began. 3 weeks later, the city had already moved on from the scandal, but the internet had not. Every search for Hayes Biotech still pulled up the same photo. Ethan Hayes leaving the Everline Hotel, and beside him, a woman holding a sketchbook. Her face half lit by a flash, her expression unreadable. That woman was Lauren Reed, and for 3 weeks she had tried to pretend that her life was normal. She still took the subway to the hospital to visit her mother. She still carried her sketchbook, though most of her drawings had been destroyed by that night's rain. And she still ignored the calls from unknown numbers until one morning, a voice on the line said, "Miss Reed, this is Hayes Biotech. Mr. Hayes requests a private meeting." Lauren almost hung up. But then the nurse walked out of her mother's room with a quiet sigh and a folded medical report. The words "urgent cardiac surgery" and "out-of-network insurance" glowed in red ink. By the time Lauren arrived at Hayes Biotech's glass headquarters, the Manhattan skyline had turned the color of steel. The receptionist's eyes flickered in recognition. The rumor of the mystery girl had obviously reached even this front desk. Ethan Hayes waited for her in a room that looked more like an art gallery than an office. Clean lines, silent machines, and walls full of framed patents. He did not stand up when she entered. He simply looked at her and said, "You came." Quote. Lauren crossed her arms. "I had questions," she said, "starting with why you sent a lawyer to my door." Ethan's tone was even. "The photos are damaging our investors' trust. I cannot afford another scandal. The fastest way to shut it down is to give the press a different story." Lauren blinked. "A different story?" He nodded. "A marriage. 6 months. On paper only. You will not have to move in. You will not have to pretend beyond public appearances. I will make sure your mother's surgery and all post-care are fully covered. In exchange, you will agree to confidentiality." For a long moment, the only sound in the room was the low hum of the air conditioning. Finally, Lauren said quietly, "You think marriage is damage control?" Ethan did not flinch. "I think perception is everything." Her voice hardened. "You think I can be bought?" He leaned back, the edge of his jaw tightening. "No, Miss Reed, I think you can survive, and I am offering you a way to do that." She stared at him, this man who could build machines to restart hearts, but spoke like someone who had never used his own. The idea itself felt absurd, offensive even. But as she turned toward the glass wall, she caught her reflection-tired eyes, thinning hope, and the image of her mother lying motionless in the hospital bed. On the desk, the envelope waited. Thick cream-colored paper embossed with the Hayes biotech seal. Her hand trembled as she lifted the first page. Clause after clause detailed the boundaries of their arrangement. No personal interference. No intimacy beyond what is necessary for public events. Automatic dissolution after 12 months. And then, at the bottom of the final page, a line in ink darker than the rest. Clause 9, full medical insurance coverage for the spouse. She froze. "You added this?" Ethan's voice was quiet now, almost human. "Yes. You said your mother was still at St. Jude's. They quoted you $280,000 for surgery. This will cover everything." Lauren looked up, eyes burning. "So I have to marry you to save her?" He did not answer. He did not need to. Her pen touched the paper. Every click of the ballpoint echoed like a heartbeat. When the last stroke ended her signature, she whispered, "I hope your shareholders are worth the cost of my soul." Quote. Ethan closed the file without looking at her. "Thank you, Mrs. Hayes. You just saved us both." Outside, the cameras were already waiting. The story had just begun. The wedding was not romantic. There were no flowers, no vows, no music. Only the sound of cameras clicking outside the courthouse and the faint hum of New York traffic beyond the tinted windows. Lauren Reed stood beside Ethan Hayes, her hands locked together, her smile frozen for the press. He did not look at her, not once. To the reporters, they were the perfect picture of a private, reserved couple who wanted no spotlight. To each other, they were two strangers, bound by signatures. When the ceremony ended, Ethan guided her through a back exit. His tone was calm, professional, like he was wrapping up a business deal. "The car will take you home," he said. "Our first public appearance as a couple will be next Thursday at the board's charity gala. You will receive wardrobe arrangements and a media briefing." Quote. Lauren turned to him. "And between now and then?" He handed her a folder. "Read this carefully. It is the agreement in full detail." Back in her small apartment, she opened the folder and felt her chest tighten. Every page was numbered and signed, stamped with Hayes Biotech's legal seal. Every rule was written in language cold enough to freeze blood. Clause 1. No interference in the private life of the other party. Clause 2. No cohabitation required. Clause 3. No public declaration of affection except when coordinated by the PR team. Clause 4. No financial claim shall remain after the contract ends. Clause 5. Immediate termination upon breach. Clause 6. Mandatory medical evaluations once per month. Lauren frowned. That last part, Clause 6, did not sound like something a CEO would care about. At the bottom of the page, written in pen instead of print, was a note in Ethan's handwriting. Both parties must attend medical evaluations monthly, non-negotiable. For some reason, that single sentence unsettled her more than the entire contract. Why did he need medical evaluations? Why insist she attend them too? The next morning, she arrived at his penthouse for their first photo shoot as a married couple. Quote, "The space looked nothing like a home, more like a laboratory with marble floors and silent machines humming in the corners. She could smell antiseptic. Everything gleamed, untouched." Ethan stood by the window, reading something on a digital tablet. Without looking up, he said, "You are late." Lauren swallowed her retort and stepped inside. Photographers adjusted their lights. Stylists fixed her hair. She stood beside him, pretending to belong in his world. At one point, the photographer asked them to hold hands. Lauren hesitated. Ethan noticed, his expression unreadable, then gently took her hand. His skin was cold, like he lived in a different temperature. The camera flashed, capturing a moment that looked genuine, even though both of them knew it was not. When the session ended, he turned to her and said quietly, "You did well." Lauren exhaled. "Do I get a gold star for pretending?" Ethan's lips curved into something that almost resembled a smile. "You get paid for it." That night, as she rode home in the company car, Lauren scrolled through her phone. The photos were already online. Headlines screamed, "Hayes Biotech CEO's new bride keeps low profile." Comment sections were on fire, some calling her lucky, others calling her a fraud. She closed the screen, staring out at the city lights sliding past the window. The same thought kept circling her mind. This is not a marriage. It is a contract with a heartbeat. The car slowed at a red light. For a second, her reflection in the glass overlapped with the glowing image of Ethan on a billboard above Times Square. Two faces side by side, strangers pretending to be in love. And yet, deep inside, she could not ignore the smallest flicker of something she did not want to name. Curiosity. What kind of man writes medical evaluations into a marriage contract? And what secret was Ethan Hayes really trying to hide? What would you do if you had to sign a marriage contract with a stranger just to survive? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Lauren Reed had lived in small spaces her whole life, tiny kitchens, secondhand furniture, and windows that looked out onto brick walls. So when she stepped into Ethan Hayes' penthouse for the first time as his legal wife, she felt as if she had entered a museum of silence. The elevator opened directly into a marble foyer lined with art pieces that probably cost more than her entire college education. The air smelled faintly of citrus and metal. Everything was symmetrical, polished, and painfully perfect. No sound of life, no warmth, not even a misplaced book. A digital voice spoke from the wall. "Good morning, Mrs. Hayes." Lauren nearly dropped her bag. She turned toward the nearest device and whispered, "You can talk?" The voice answered politely, "This home operates on an automated domestic system. Would you like me to adjust the temperature?" She laughed, shaking her head. "No, thank you. Just keep breathing, I guess." Ethan's footsteps echoed from the hall. He appeared wearing a white shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows. No tie, no jacket. It was the first time she had seen him look human, not like a headline. He paused. "You are early." "I was told punctuality matters," she said. "It does," he replied. "Breakfast is ready. The kitchen is to your left." When she entered, the kitchen looked like the control room of a spaceship. Countertops blinked with digital screens, and every appliance waited for a voice command. Lauren tried to make coffee manually, but the machine interrupted her. Voice activation required. "Cool." She rolled her eyes. "Of course it is." Ethan leaned against the counter, watching her. "Would you like me to show you?" "No," she said, pressing random buttons. "I would like to feel useful if that is allowed in your perfect world." The coffee machine whirred, sputtered, and finally hissed out a weak stream. She laughed. "Look at that! Human 1, Robot 0. He smiled for the first time that morning. "You are smiling," she teased. He looked away. System malfunction. Cool. The tension broke for a second, replaced by something warmer, an echo of humor neither of them expected. Later that day, they attended their first public event together, the annual Hayes Foundation Charity Gala. Lauren wore a simple navy gown chosen by the company stylist, but somehow, under the golden lights, she looked luminous. Cameras flashed as they entered the ballroom arm in arm. Ethan leaned close and whispered, "Remember, do not speak about your personal life." "Quote," she whispered back, "Do I even have one anymore?" The speeches were long and mechanical until one reporter asked her a direct question. "Mrs. Hayes, what is your view on healing? You are married to the man who builds the machines that keep people alive." The microphone trembled in her hand. Everyone was waiting for a rehearsed answer, something about innovation and technology. Instead, Lauren looked up and said softly, "Healing is not just medicine. Sometimes it is a person." Quote, for a heartbeat, the entire room went silent. Even Ethan stopped breathing. The cameras captured the exact second his eyes softened, his jaw loosened, and his posture shifted from control to curiosity. Later, in the car ride home, neither of them spoke. Lauren stared out at the glowing city, and Ethan typed on his phone without a word. But when the car stopped at a red light, he glanced at her reflection in the window and said quietly, "You surprised them tonight." Quote, Did I surprise you too? She asked. He hesitated. Yes, you did. Outside, the rain had started again, small and rhythmic against the glass. Inside, two strangers sat side by side, pretending to be married, and for the first time, it did not feel entirely like pretending. The distance between their worlds had begun to crack, and as always, we would love to know your thoughts. Can two people from completely different lives ever meet in the middle and make it work? Share your opinion in the comments below. The gala had changed something between them, but Lauren could not tell what it was. Ethan Hayes was quieter now, less like a machine and more like a man observing his own reflection for the first time. Yet for every small spark of warmth, there was still the shadow of control behind his eyes. Days turned into weeks. Their public appearances multiplied charity luncheons, tech conferences, magazine interviews. Lauren learned to stand in front of flashing cameras without blinking, to answer polite questions without trembling. She became the perfect image of composure, the graceful Mrs. Hayes the media wanted to see. But perfection, like glass, eventually cracks. One afternoon, she was leaving the hospital after visiting her mother when two reporters blocked her path. They shoved microphones toward her, shouting questions that cut deeper than she expected. Mrs. Hayes, is it true your mother's bills are being paid by your husband's company? Is it true you married him for money? She froze. The truth hung in the air like fog, thick, heavy, impossible to explain without revealing everything. Security guards appeared, pushing the reporters back, but one of them shouted after her, "Your father had a criminal record, did he not? Are you hiding that too?" The world stopped moving. The color drained from her face. Her father's past had been buried for years, sealed away to protect her mother's reputation. Now it was public. She stumbled into the car, breathing hard. Ethan was waiting for her at the penthouse when she arrived. His phone was already ringing, board members demanding a statement. He looked up at her and asked, "Is it true?" Her voice trembled. "My father made mistakes, but he paid for them. Why does that matter now?" Ethan's expression softened, but the words came from habit, not heart. "Because perception matters, we must respond carefully." Lauren laughed bitterly. "Perception. That word again. You care more about headlines than people." He did not answer. Instead, he reached for his coat. "There is a press conference tomorrow. You will stand beside me. We will handle this together." The next day, under the bright lights of the company's media hall, Ethan faced the crowd of reporters. Lauren stood beside him, pale but calm. Flashbulbs exploded in bursts of white light. A reporter shouted, "Mr. Hayes, is your marriage to Miss Reed genuine or a publicity stunt?" Ethan's jaw tightened. He began to answer, but Lauren placed a hand on his arm. Her voice was steady. "If money could save my mother's life and restore his company's trust at the same time, then yes, maybe it started as a deal. But every deal has a human side. I have seen what his company does for patients who cannot afford hope. If this marriage makes that possible, I can live with being misunderstood." The room went silent. Even the cameras seemed to hesitate. Ethan turned to her, truly seeing her for the first time not as a contract, but as a person who had risked her dignity to protect something bigger than herself. When the conference ended, they left through a side door into the quiet corridor. For a moment, they stood still, the hum of distant voices fading behind them. Ethan said softly, "You did not have to defend me." Lauren met his eyes. "I was not defending you, I was defending myself." He nodded, his voice almost a whisper. "You did well." She gave a small, tired smile. "I was not pretending this time." Outside, the world still doubted them. But inside, something had shifted. Trust had replaced performance. For the first time, their story was no longer just about contracts and appearances. It was about two people standing in the same storm and realizing they were not enemies anymore. That night, the city outside the penthouse pulsed with neon light, but inside it was completely still. The media frenzy after the press conference had died down, leaving behind a silence that felt heavier than noise. Ethan Hayes sat in his office, staring at the same article replaying on his tablet screen. Fake love or real redemption? The Hayes marriage scandal that refuses to fade. He scrolled through the comments until he saw one that made him stop. Someone had written, "If this woman is faking it, then why does she look at him like that?" He turned off the screen, because he did not know the answer. In the next room, Lauren Reed was painting again. Her mother's surgery had been successful 2 weeks earlier, and the hospital had finally discharged her. For the first time in months, Lauren had time to breathe. The canvas glowed beneath soft light, covered in abstract streaks of gold and blue light and heartbeats, the two things she understood best. She did not hear Ethan walk in until his voice broke the quiet. "That is beautiful." Quote. She turned, startled. "You are home early." I finished the board meeting faster than expected. He hesitated, watching her. You have not painted since the night we met. I forgot what it felt like, she said softly. But it feels good. It feels alive. Ethan nodded. You should keep doing it. Lauren smiled, then tilted her head. That almost sounded like encouragement. Do not get used to it, he replied, but there was warmth in his tone. They shared a quiet moment before the power flickered. The lights dimmed, then shut off completely. A second later, the entire penthouse fell into darkness. Lauren laughed nervously. Do you not have a backup generator for your perfect world? He checked his phone. It must be the storm. I will reset the system manually. When he turned toward the hall, she followed him. You really cannot stand silence, can you? It is not silence that bothers me, he said. It is the things that come with it. As they reached the control room, Lauren suddenly stumbled. Her hand went to her chest, her breath catching. Lauren? She shook her head. It is fine. I just stood up too fast. But her voice was fading. Before he could reach her, she collapsed to the floor. Ethan caught her, panic slicing through his chest. Her skin was cold. Her pulse fluttered weakly beneath his fingers. Lauren, stay with me. Chloe. He grabbed his phone and called the emergency team. Cardiac episode, he said quickly. Hayes Tower, 21st floor, now. He carried her to the couch, holding her close until the paramedics arrived. When they rushed her to the hospital, he followed without a word. Hours later, in the white glow of the intensive care unit, Ethan stood beside her bed. Machines hummed softly, keeping rhythm with the faint beeping of her heart monitor. The doctor approached him quietly. She has a congenital defect. The stress may have triggered it. She needs surgery, but she is stable for now. Ethan nodded, his throat tight. He took her hand, whispering, You are not part of a contract anymore, Lauren. You are the only thing that feels real. Her eyes fluttered open for a second. If you want something real, she whispered weakly, stop hiding behind signatures. Then she drifted back into sleep. Ethan stood there, frozen. All his wealth, his precision, his logic, none of it could protect her. And for the first time in his life, he was afraid. Do you believe love can grow from something that started as a deal? Tell us in the comments. We read every one of them. The hospital smelled of antiseptic and fear. Ethan Hayes had not left the building for 2 days. He watched every rise and fall of Lauren Reed's chest, every flicker on the heart monitor, terrified that one of those numbers would drop and never rise again. He had made a career out of controlling variables, machines, data, people. But this was chaos he could not program away. When the doctors finally allowed him to step outside the room, he found the hospital corridor filled with flashing lights and microphones. Reporters had already found them. Someone had leaked the news that Mrs. Hayes had collapsed. One voice rose above the others. Mr. Hayes, is it true your wife's illness was hidden in your marriage contract? He froze. The question struck like a blade. Another reporter shouted, Did you know she was sick when you married her? Was this all a cover-up? He turned away, jaw tight, saying nothing. Security pulled the reporters back, but their words had already reached the world. By morning, the headlines were everywhere. The Hayes contract marriage was built on lies. CEO marries dying artist, public sympathy or corporate strategy. In the company's glass tower, the boardroom felt colder than ever. Evelyn Stone, the company's vice president, stood at the head of the table. Her smile was sharp, professional, and deadly. Ethan, she began, the shareholders are panicking. The stock dropped 12% overnight. Our image is in freefall. We need to issue a statement. He leaned back in his chair. We will wait. Wait, Evelyn repeated, eyes narrowing. You cannot fix this with silence. If you do not act, the board will vote to remove you. Ethan's tone stayed calm, but his eyes were storm dark. You think removing me will rebuild trust? You think firing me will save this company? The problem is not me, Evelyn. The problem is that you leaked this story. Her lips tightened. You have no proof. Quote, I do not need proof, he said. I know the way you operate. You wanted my seat from the moment you joined. Evelyn's voice dropped to a whisper. You are blinded by her. You risked everything for a woman who was never meant for you. He stood, his chair scraping the floor. If protecting her costs me everything, then so be it. The room fell silent. Evelyn's gaze turned cold. Then you will lose everything, Ethan. Quote. By the time he returned to the hospital, the board had already called an emergency vote. His removal as CEO was only hours away. Lauren was awake when he walked into her room. Her skin was pale, but her eyes were clear. She could tell something was wrong before he said a word. What happened? She asked softly. He tried to smile. It is nothing. Just business. She frowned. Do not lie to me, please. He exhaled. They want me out. The board believes the marriage damaged the company. Quote, Lauren's hands tightened on the blanket. So they punish you for being human. He sat beside her, taking her hand. I wanted to end the contract, he said, to protect you, but they turned it into something else. She stared at him, her voice breaking. You think ending it will protect me, Ethan? The moment you leave, they will destroy you, and I will become the story again. He shook his head. I can handle that. I just want you safe. Tears filled her eyes. You do not get to decide what safe means for me. For the first time, she pulled her hand away. You once told me perception is everything, she whispered. But perception changes. Maybe it is time you see what love really looks like when you stop controlling it. He looked at her, helpless, as the nurse entered the room to check her vitals. Outside, the rain began again, soft, relentless, like the city itself was holding its breath. Ethan walked out into the hall, his reflection ghosted in the glass wall beside him. He had built an empire on logic. Now it was crumbling in the face of something he could not calculate: love. The vote to remove Ethan Hayes as CEO of Hayes Biotech was unanimous. By the next morning, every financial news channel was reporting the same headline: Hayes steps down amid marriage scandal. To most people, it looked like defeat, but for Ethan, it felt like freedom for the first time in years. He walked out of the headquarters with no security team, no driver, and no entourage. For a man who had built an empire out of logic, the only thing that mattered now was emotion, the kind that could not be bought, sold, or signed into a contract. Lauren Reed was still in the hospital preparing for surgery. The doctors had scheduled her operation for the following week, but her condition was deteriorating faster than expected. She tried to stay calm, reading letters from patients who had benefited from Hayes Biotech's devices, but the fear inside her grew heavier every night. When the door opened, she expected a nurse. Instead, Ethan stood there, holding a small paper bag and looking nothing like the man she had met months ago. His suit was gone, replaced by a gray sweater and exhaustion written across his face. You should not be here, she whispered. You are supposed to be saving your company. Quote, I sold my shares this morning, he said quietly. They have a new CEO now. Evelyn can have the throne. I do not need it. Lauren stared at him, stunned. You gave it all up? He nodded. I gave up control. That is what almost killed both of us. He sat beside her bed, unpacking the paper bag. Inside were containers of soup, a small book of poetry, and the worn sketch she had left behind in his office, the one ruined by whiskey on the night they first met. He had framed it. The stains looked like gold under the glass. I had it restored, he said softly. It reminded me that some mistakes are worth keeping. She smiled weakly, tears filling her eyes. You really do not know how to stop surprising me, do you? He shook his head. Clause 7 was never about controlling you. It was my excuse to see you. Every month I looked forward to those medical evaluations because it meant I could hear you talk, even if only for 5 minutes. Lauren reached for his hand. You could have just told me. I was too afraid, he said. Afraid that if I said it out loud, I would lose the only part of my life that felt honest. The door opened again, and a nurse stepped in. Mr. Hayes, it is time. The surgical team is ready. Ethan stood, his grip still firm around her hand. I will be right here when you wake up. Lauren tried to smile. You better be. I do not plan on haunting you if things go wrong. Quote. He forced a laugh, but his eyes betrayed the fear he could not say. Hours passed like years. Ethan sat in the waiting area, the small book of poetry unopened in his hands. Every time a doctor walked by, his heart stopped. Finally, the surgeon emerged. She is stable. The operation was successful. Ethan exhaled for what felt like the first time in forever. He walked into the recovery room where Lauren lay pale but alive. He took her hand and whispered, You did it. You really did it. Quote. Her eyelids fluttered open, and a small smile curved on her lips. So did you. You let go. He leaned closer. I am not letting go of you. For the first time, there was no contract between them, no signatures, no clauses, no rules. Only two people who had finally learned that healing was not about fixing hearts, but finding the courage to feel them. Outside, the morning sun rose over New York, and for Ethan and Lauren, it finally felt like a beginning. 3 months passed. Winter faded into spring, and for the first time in years, the city felt alive again. Hayes Biotech had moved on without Ethan Hayes. The world had stopped talking about scandals and shifted to new headlines. But for Ethan and Lauren, the story was far from over. Lauren's recovery was slow but steady. Each day, she walked a little farther down the hospital corridor, her steps uncertain but full of quiet determination. Every morning, Ethan was there, sometimes with coffee, sometimes with a newspaper, sometimes just sitting in silence beside her. The tabloids no longer cared about their every move, and that anonymity became their peace. But the void left behind by the company's fall had grown into something new. One afternoon, Ethan entered her room holding a folder. On the cover, printed in bold letters, were the words, Heartline Foundation. Lauren looked up. "What is that?" "It is what comes next," he said. "A non-profit for cardiac patients who cannot afford surgery. It will fund research, recovery, and art therapy programs. I want it to be built in your name." She blinked in disbelief. "Ethan, that is too much." He smiled softly. "It is not charity. It is gratitude. You reminded me that saving lives is not just science, it is humanity." Tears filled her eyes, but she laughed through them. "You know, that sounds suspiciously romantic for a man who once made me sign a 12-page contract." He chuckled, his voice low. "That was business. This is love." A week later, the Heartline Foundation held its opening ceremony in a renovated hospital wing. Reporters came, not to chase gossip, but to witness something genuine. Lauren stood at the podium, her voice steady though her hands trembled slightly. "3 months ago," she began, "I was the subject of every headline you could imagine. They called me a fraud, a liar, a woman who sold her dignity. But what they never saw was what happened after the cameras turned away." She glanced at Ethan in the front row. "What happened was healing, not the kind that doctors perform, but the kind that love teaches." Applause filled the room. When she stepped down, Ethan met her halfway. In front of the crowd, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a small envelope. "What is that?" she asked, half smiling. He unfolded it carefully. It was a single page, handwritten in his familiar, precise style. "I thought we could rewrite the contract," he said. She raised an eyebrow. "Another one?" "This one is different," he said. "No clauses, no signatures, just one question." He handed her the paper. At the center of the page were the words, "Will you choose to stay, not because you have to, but because you want to?" The crowd went silent. Lauren's eyes glistened as she looked at him. "You are really bad at keeping things private, you know that?" He laughed quietly. "Apparently, I am better at loving in public than I thought." She reached for a pen on the table and signed her name at the bottom, right under his. The room erupted into applause as flashbulbs lit the air, but for them, the world had shrunk to a single heartbeat shared between two people. She whispered, "No more contracts." He nodded, taking her hand. "No more conditions, just choice." As they stood under the golden lights of the foundation's banner, the camera panned to the framed photo of their first press conference back when everything had been fake. Now, that same pair stood in the open, side by side. No masks, no lies. Ethan turned to her. "You saved me from myself, Lauren Reed." She smiled. "And you proved that even broken systems can be rebuilt with love." The crowd cheered, but neither of them heard it. The world could write whatever story it wanted. Theirs had already found its ending 2 signatures, not on paper this time, but on each other's hearts. If you were in Lauren's place, would you give Ethan a second chance? Or would you walk away and start over alone? Share your thoughts below, because sometimes the best endings are the ones we choose to believe in.